Yeah, so as Dennis Brown walks away, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor, if I can. Remind you about the Breaking Boundaries Facebook group, to hit that button if you haven't. And you can follow me on the socials, on the TikTok, the X, Instagram, etc. at Hugh Mayers, which is HUGHMAYERS. Feel free to leave a comment if you'd rather not call in. But if you do want to call in and leave a comment, the number is 07826 115543, which I'll be giving out periodically. But yes, you are more than welcome to leave a comment if you're not the caller type, to leave a comment on the ECR website in the chat room. Shout out to Sister A, who made a point regarding the dating scenario. She makes a point that I would expect somebody to pay, to find a location and pay. Right? Sister, she expects them to find, the gentleman to find a location and pay if they have asked her out. And likewise, if she asks somebody on a date, she would also do the same in kind, find a location and pay. Enough respect to Sister A. And Rank says regarding politician and Whittaker's murder, it's interesting the way that the information has been released and that they're very insistent. I think that they, mean the authorities, are very insistent on saying it wasn't politically motivated, it wasn't terrorism, it's a lone wolf, I would comment on that by saying because the demographic of the suspect would be guiding that, or would have a strong influence on that. We know this from data, from research, that when, criminals are codified, not just depending on the crime, but depending on their ethnicity. And this is why we've had cases before where politicians have been murdered, and we understand it to be for their political views, because they were public individuals, right? Were murdered, but they were murdered by non-whites, right? Or been attacked by non-white people, and people of color, should I say, right? And it was easily codified as politically motivated and therefore an act of terrorism. But we've found, not just in the UK, but even in the USA, that when it is a crime committed by a white male, more often than not women, but by a white man, a white guy, or white men, plural, they hate crime and non-politically motivated, or he had mental health. He was an odd fella. He's a bit of a weirdo. He's a strange guy. But they wrestle with the idea of saying, actually, this was an act of terrorism. The guy could have even left a manifesto with a 10-point plan about what he's hoping to achieve in the future, and they really struggled. I mean, he'd have to almost state that I'm a terrorist. You know what I mean? I don't know how much more blatant they have to do it. So that's, I think, what's kind of like guide, that does influence or guide the way that the authorities release the information or how they frame the crime, because it is very much the bias is tribalism is alive and well. Yeah, but let's go into our main topic. So the one that we've all been thinking about, because there's been some stuff with the famous brothers of the UK, like in the spotlight, but not for the right reasons. Now, the character Jamie from Top Boy had many of you captivated on your screens, right? Had fully engaged with his acting skills. He's also been in other productions, but the other noteworthy one was Blue Story. And just checking the young man's art out, I think he has the capacity, if given the opportunity, to play lots of different roles. Like, I could imagine him playing the role of like a GP that was born in the inner cities, or a surgeon that was born in the inner cities that came from a council estate, but because of his bright, and enthusiastic and dedication to education, won a scholarship and then becomes a surgeon. And how does he navigate life? And I can imagine him in different roles. He doesn't have to be just like a road dude all the time. I think he's got that level of skill. Actually, I learned that I used to see, what's his name? The one that is more, the other character from Top Boy, the Shane, Ashley Waters, and I used to see him in the media on the TV and doing the whole what's it called, Soul Solid, gig, the whole Soul Solid gig and rapping and whatever on the screen, and I thought, oh, people say he's an actor, but he's a road youth and he's kind of like one dimensional. Then I went to a play in Waterloo, and he played how can I put it? His character was like, and this is a character I'm talking, not him, but the character was like a kind of a coconut football supporter, like England fan, but like a black guy that didn't know himself. And when I say it was in night and day of the Shane or any other things that you see him play on the screen or whatever, like this is long before adolescent or anything like that. And the throwdown that he did, I was like, raw, like live performance. I was like, no, he's a proper thespian, like a real actor. Don't joke. Like, no, he's not just like a typecasted kind of kid. No. He did his thing. So, we got talent in the community. We got talent in abundance. And, sometimes it's just about young brothers being given an opportunity. So, Michael Ward was given his opportunity and he nailed it in Blue Story, nailed it in Top Boy, to name a few, and won himself a BAFTA in 2020. So that's not no small feat, right? And from what I understand, he's not from that side of the track, as in like, oh, he's from that whole prep school kind of personality. So he had to graft. I don't think there were no favors for him. But let's kind of like take a deep dive, because I think we even mentioned this at the start of the year about this, when he was his charges became public. But the headline reads, Top Boy actor Michael Ward cleared of rape and sexual assault charges. 5 charges related to an encounter with that he had at a New Year's Day party in London in 2023. The Top Boy actor Michael Ward has been cleared of raping and sexually assaulting a woman who claimed he attacked her in the back of a car. And it's a woman, we don't know her name. Ward, 28, who is best known for his roles in the crime drama and Steve McQueen's Small Axe, was acquitted of 2 counts of rape, 2 counts of assault by penetration, and 1 count of assault. After a 10-day trial at Sneersbrook Crown Court, the charges, prosecutors alleged that Ward sexually assaulted and raped a woman in the back of a Mercedes after inviting her into the vehicle. The complainant, who cannot be named, told the court she repeatedly indicated she wanted to leave and felt intimidated by Ward's fame, delaying her report to the police because she initially blamed herself for what had happened. Giving evidence, the woman said she had been left in pain after the alleged assault and believed there had been blood on her clothing. Ward denied the allegations throughout the trial, telling jurors the pair had been friendly and flirty during the evening, and instead she had been a willing participant in everything that was going on. I don't know if any of you were following the court reports, or that videos that were coming out. So these were daily videos coming out, like summarizing the day. But it came to pass that the judge asked one TikToker, who's I think got 500,000 followers, to take them down because it could have influenced the jury members. But it was mentioned in that report, we can mention that now because the case is closed, that the main prosecution witness at one point was saying things that I can't remember, and that a story started to contradict itself and looked as if, it came out that evidence had been deleted, like certain messages that would have not looked favorable as a complainant, those messages were deleted. And there was contradictions and issues related to wanting to leave the party, left the party, drove miles away to go to use the lavatory somewhere else, and then in a McDonald's in Gants Hill. And then so like the question was, well, that they wouldn't allow you to buy food, wouldn't let you in to use the toilet, so you turned around and drove a number of miles way back to the party just to use a toilet. So there were certain things that was like raised along the way that seemed like a contradiction. And I know there has been like a dearth of information or opinions, should I say, coming out on the internet. And there's one set of people saying things like, she should be named and shamed. Not sure if I agree with that. But also other people saying just because he was acquitted doesn't mean he's innocent. And so I'm trying to understand, well, if he's acquitted and he's not innocent, doesn't mean he's innocent, then what does innocent mean then? Like, do you know what I'm trying to say to you? Because does the pendulum swing the same way when the person is convicted and you say, yeah, just convicted, we don't believe, doesn't mean that he's guilty. Like, we have to be careful. Or like, does the logic match up? We know that it's an emotive subject. We know that it's either side of the aisle. The person that is accused that is innocent, that is something vile for them to happen and damaging. But likewise, or not likewise, but even more serious is, you know, the victim that doesn't feel protected, that feels violated, that, you know, doesn't receive justice. This is not the case. This man is acquitted. This was an innocent man we're talking about. So we're just using it to articulate kind of like wider ramifications. But yeah, there's been so many opinions that have been coming out on social media, and it is a really important conversation because there is something about, one, the image, right, of black and racialized men within Western society, and particularly black men, and this charge and this generalization about sexually deviant, right? Sometimes, like, you know, in the media, in the art, in the way that newspapers report stories and the TV report stories, the way that famous people have been even objectified, but there's this kind of sexual objectification of black men. We all remember Linford Christie and his running shorts that he wore for comfort, but like how, whether it's Saint and Greavesy or the Sun newspaper, they always talking about Linford's lunchbox and stuff like that, brought a grown man to tears because they objectified him. And like, some people couldn't even understand, why is he upset? It's not like it's no biggie, but like, he ain't human. He ain't a person with feelings, with tear ducts, you know what I'm trying to say, and emotions. That, like, why is he crying for? Because the image of black men has been such in the public discourse over the years, from colonial times to, you know, go back further to the transatlantic slave trade. There is a certain image that has been crafted by the public, in the public space, right? And it's come from the pseudoscience, it's come from the media, it's come from the culture. Why do you think when innocent black men were lynched, for example, in the USA, that there was always this practice, or commonly a practice, of sexual assault, of them being sexually assaulted, you know, and being castrated? It's because of that psychology, right? Because of that threat or that fear or that projection onto the black male body, right? So yeah, the rabbit hole does go deep. Ward denied the allegations throughout the trial, telling jurors the pair had been friendly and flirty during the evening, and insisting she had been a willing participant in everything that was going on. It's what she wanted, he said. There was mutual interest. His defense argued that the prosecution's account was undermined by forensic evidence, which showed that examinations of the complainant's clothing found no blood, despite her recollection that there had been some on her leggings and underwear. Ward was arrested later that month, and in a prepared statement to the police, denied rape, saying that the pair had engaged in consensual sexual activity. And isn't it true that the MMA star, not to detract from this story, but the MMA star Colin McGregor paid a woman an out-of-court settlement, or civil, paid civil damages for sexually assaulting a woman? He didn't receive the same media attention or the same frame, did it? And he was, he lost the case in a civil court, right? The evidence is that the woman had to have her sanitary towel surgically removed in the hospital. The court heard evidence from the actor Jasmine Jobson, Ward's Top Boy co-star, who described him as my brother and said she had been in total shock when she learned of the allegations. Jobson told jurors she had always known Ward to be a beautiful soul, a kind-hearted man, adding that she had never felt uncomfortable around him. She said the charges had in effect halted his acting career for more than 3 years while the case was pending. The actor cried as the jury returned a unanimous not guilty verdict on all 5 charges. After a day of celebrations, the trial was briefly interrupted after a social media influencer with more than 500,000 followers was removed from the court over videos he had posted online commenting on evidence while proceedings were going on. Yeah, I mentioned that. I think that you are allowed to report, you know, the judge can either put a partial restraint on the media reporting, or they can put a total blackout. You're not allowed to report anything, right, that is said in court. I think there would have been a partial on this. It wasn't that it was reporting was banned in and of itself. But if I'm not mistaken, excuse me, having seen some of those videos, I believe he didn't just give an account, he gave commentary. So after reporting the facts, what had happened, she'd been cross-examined, she said A and B, the judge intervened and said C, and also the prosecution legal team made certain comments. That would have been sufficient, but then, you know, there were comments like, that would have been damaging, that looked really bad, you know, or there was like, when you give commentary now, then that might, if the jury see this, it might sway the jury's opinion. So I think the judge demanded that those videos be taken down. The YouTuber known for celebrity and reality commentary, a YouTuber known for celebrity and reality television commentary had published videos discussing the complaints, cross-examination, expressing views about her credibility. He had also filmed within the grounds of Snaresbrook Crown Court and approached members of Ward's family outside the building. Not cool. Judge Dean ordered Morelli, the YouTuber, to take down the videos and have the courthouse, and asked him to leave the courthouse after telling him she was absolutely determined to make sure that nothing disrupts the trial. The Attorney General was alerted to consider whether the posts amounted to contempt of court. The judge also cleared the public gallery for parts of the trial while inquiries were made to ensure jurors had not seen the online material. So I think that's why it wasn't a problem, but they were more of a precautionary and procedural measure. Ward rose to prominence in 2019 in the film Blue Story before winning the BAFTA Rising Star Award in 2020. He also appeared in Empire of Light. So yeah, it's plenty of food for thought. It's no small matter, no small charge, and yeah, we have to also contemplate on what does that impact of such a charge have on the innocent, the exonerated, right? The man that walks with his reputation legally intact. But is there a psychological fallout? Is there a reputational fallout? Is there always a shadow? Does it matter what culture or genre, if the person is famous, does it have more or less of an impact depending on if it's a famous individual from the world of finance, working in the stock exchange? If he was known as the whiz kid from Silicon Valley or from the City of London, Bank of England affiliate, right? Does Ward receive a different type of outcome if he was a TV intellectual talking about money and finance? Does it have a more or less staining impact on his career when he's exonerated? The fact that it's a type of movies, I mean, Blue Story, and it's art, it's fiction, but Blue Story, street life, gang life, Top Boy, street life, gang life, does that Does that enhance? Does that detract from? Does that stain? Does it have that kind of impact? Like, would like the difference between a black man that was known for playing the piano, like John Legend or something like that, or a gangster rapper with a tattoo in his face? Does it, out of those other variables, not just of color, but maybe class or public reputation, how do those things impact? The live link number is 07826 115543. Right? There is a question, right, that we have to consider in the whole scheme of things. Has the damage already been done? Has the damage already been done? But yeah, I'd be interested to know your thoughts, your opinions, your reflections. You know that we don't have to agree. We definitely can disagree. Divergence of opinion is pretty cool, just as long as we're not disagreeable about it. Yeah, but let me know your thoughts and reflections about this case, but maybe more in a kind of wider context. Maybe more of a wider context also. Hello, sis. How you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm excellent. Really interested as a sister to get your your analysis, your opinion.
All right. So I'm gonna speak first of all as a lawyer. So I'm a non-practicing barrister. I used to practice in the criminal courts.
Mm-hmm.
So I've both prosecuted rape cases and I've defended rape cases.
Okay, so we double appreciate your call then. We double appreciate this.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a distinction between acquittal and innocence. Okay, so I'm not saying that the brother is an innocent. I don't know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're talking generically. You're saying like the difference between acquittal and innocence.
Yes.
Okay.
The fact that someone has been acquitted doesn't mean that they're innocent. What it means is that there wasn't sufficient proof for a jury to be sure of their guilt. That's what it means.
Right.
So someone can be acquitted, but they have committed the crime. So it could be that the jury felt, I don't like how the person came across, the alleged victim, or the evidence just doesn't make me feel sure that he did it. I can't say that I am sure that the person did it.
And could you? I'm going to ask you, Zuri, just to say a bit about the burden of proof, like the difference between civil and criminal as well.
So the burden of proof in a criminal case is on the prosecution, and they have to make the jury sure. So it's a very high threshold that they have to meet. So you will often hear the term beyond a reasonable doubt. You've got to provide sufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. So the jury has to feel satisfied so that they are sure.
Mm-hmm.
In a civil case, the burden is lower. There just has to be, it's on a balance of probabilities, more likely than not. So it's easier actually to establish matters in a civil proceeding than it is in a criminal proceeding, which is why sometimes you'll find that a person is acquitted in criminal proceedings, but they're found liable in civil proceedings because the burden of proof is lower. Now, with this type of case, rape cases, they are particularly difficult to prove, all right? Because usually there are no witnesses. It's one person's word against the other in the absence of any kind of forensic evidence or CCTV evidence or whatever.
Yeah.
Often the two individuals know each other. Often they've had a prior relationship where there was consensual intimacy. So these cases are really difficult to prove. So the prosecution rate in these cases is really low. I think it's only between 2.5% and 5% of allegations that are actually prosecuted.
Yeah, they don't. So that means, just for the listeners, in other words, like they don't even go to trial.
They don't go to trial. So an allegation is made, there's an investigation, the Crown Prosecution Service say there's an insufficiency of evidence because they have to meet a threshold to say that they're going to prosecute. So I think the first thing for me is, why was this case prosecuted based on the evidence that there appears to be? Now, I know that, you have to gauge the evidence continuously. So it may be at the time the evidence seemed to be more substantial than it was when it went to trial. But on the face of it, I think questions have to be asked as to why, in the circumstances, this case was prosecuted. And I have to take account of the fact that we're looking at a celebrity brother. And whether that was an influencing decision on those that, or an influencing factor, should I say, on those that made the decision to take this case to trial. Because as I say, it's very, very few allegations that are actually prosecuted, very few.
And the evidence that was put forward doesn't seem phenomenal, or you're left answering the question. It doesn't seem as much, and there may be cases where there was more evidence and it still didn't go forward. It wasn't deemed strong enough. So what was this factor? What was the silver bullet that made the prosecution decide to go forward? Was it his fame? Was it his name?
Well, I think questions have to be asked, because as you say, there have been allegations where there was more evidence, where you would think, why, brother, this one really should go to trial, and it wasn't prosecuted.
Right.
There may be things that we don't know. Often there are things that don't come out
True.
to the public forum.
Yeah.
But I think questions still need to be asked in light of the evidence that we do know. Why is it that the decision was made to prosecute this? Because the point that you raised is a really valid one. These cases take long. I mean, this has been hanging over the brother's head for 3 years now. And whether him do it or not do it, I mean, the jury clearly acquitted him.
Yes.
Mud sticks. So even with an acquittal, there are going to be people who think, why no smoke without fire? And in the industry that he's in, I have to wonder whether he's in a position now to make a successful comeback. He may be, I don't know, but there's always going to be this stain, I think, that could tarnish his reputation. So that's one thing. But for me, there is a bigger question, which is about relationship dynamics.
Okay.
And I'm going to pivot now.
Let's go.
What was my former profession, which was a practicing barrister, to what is my current profession, which is a university lecturer, where I teach people to be barristers. And as a lecturer, I've been doing this a long, long time. I meet students all the time. I have to say that the allegations of rape, sexual assault, sexual misconduct is rife within universities, certainly my university, and I have no reason to believe that my university is any different. I believe
according to the research, I think your university is quote unquote normal. It's rife across the campus in like countries like the UK, America, I believe Canada as well. There is issues about sexual impropriety on campus. Young men and young women, hormonal young men and unmarried young men and women in space, alcohol, student lifestyle, the blurring of lines, the hazing culture that some universities have, all this drink culture and stuff like that. So it does get complicated. But what was the point that you was going to make about your observations at uni?
So I've come across a lot of predominantly young women, a few men, but predominantly young women who have made allegations of rape and sexual assault, who don't want to pursue it for a variety of reasons. So it doesn't even get to the police to be investigated, never mind the Crown Prosecution Service, considering it for a prosecution, for a variety of reasons. And I do think we need to look at the culture, and I'm talking culture generally, if I'm going to frame it, I'm going to frame it as the sexual dynamic culture that exists between young men and young women, because they're getting a lot of conflicting, unhealthy messages, and a lot of it is about what they shouldn't be doing and should be doing, but there's very little about how to enter into healthy relationships. So for a lot of the women now, and this may be somewhat generic and stereotyping, you've got like the quote unquote the bad bitch cult. Everybody a bad bitch, and
the baddie cult, yeah, the baddie girl, yeah. There's all of that.
If you want to have sex with everybody, we can do it because it's my body, and you're not telling me what to do with my body. And then on the male side now, you've got the very what the word? You can't think of the word, but you know, you've got the culture with the Andrew Tate and them the idiot there. So they're getting these messages, and it's very, very difficult to navigate and to find a healthy way through this swamp, really.
What you describing sounds like a minefield.
It is. It is. You know, and you know something, right? Often what happens, from what I can see from my own anecdotal evidence and my own experience, is that often it's a misinterpretation. There's not a question of bad intention or malicious intention. It's a misinterpretation as to what the other person is prepared to accept. So why there needs to be a re-education, as far as I'm concerned, about relationships and what is healthy and what is appropriate.
Yeah. I'd have to agree with that, and I would take it a step further and say the extra emphasis would be added on people who are not in relationships. You know the difference between, we say, oh, those two are, they're engaged, or they go steady, they go together, they say in the movies, right, in the films, but they're a couple, or the arcs are out, they're dating. That's one level of conversation about boundaries and what's acceptable and understanding. But also, for those people who are outside, they use this phrase nowadays, outside, like they just, they're happy to go out and maybe meet somebody for the night who they're gonna, be intimate. I can't even use the word intimate, just have sex with, right?
Yeah.
That's even more charged or, loaded or for misunderstanding, misinterpretation. You don't even know, they don't know each other to know each other's rhythm or make assumptions and presumptions. So, yeah, and I will say this, especially as a black man, young black man with a reputation and money, those guys, the days of when you was 19 and maybe a couple girls in the area knew your face and you could go out and move like that, it's done. That was 10 years ago. You're famous, you're national, internationally known, award winning. You can't be meeting strangers now and be alone with strange women. I gotta put it like that. You can't afford to move like that. Even if you think it's all on and popping or it's all good and you're going there with good intention, you could even be setting yourself up or leaving yourself open.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a responsibility on parents, on educators, to be, look, we've got to speak to our daughters, we've got to speak to our sons and set out clear boundaries.
Indeed.
And also I think we've got to, what I find really interesting is that often the messages that they are receiving don't align with what their own spirit is telling them. Sometimes you just have to go back to your natural instinct.
Yeah.
Message I tell you, say you can do what you want, but your body and your spirit, I tell you, say, no, that don't feel right. Go with your body and your spirit. If it don't feel right, it's not right.
Yeah. I have to agree with that.
So, all I can say, but is me glad to me no young. That's all me can say.
Indeed. It's tough out there. It's tough out there for the youngsters. It's tough out there for the youngsters. And I'm hoping that, I really appreciate you giving some education and some expert knowledge as a lecturer, as a former barrister, practicing barrister. We appreciate that.
No worries.
Yeah, man, appreciate that. I'm going to leave the line open so some others can call in, but I really value your contribution, my sister. Have a blessed afternoon.
Thank you. One love. Take care.
One love. Yeah, there you have it. You heard it. It's a deep conversation, and there's something different about the burden of proof in a criminal prosecution. It's the beyond reasonable doubt, so it's a higher benchmark. In a civil case, it's balance of probabilities, a lower benchmark, and there is a difference. Sister Queen made the point about the difference between being acquitted or and found innocent, and that's not but was not mentioned in regard to the Michael Ward case. It's just to say that evidence, in certain cases evidence may not have met the threshold. But yeah, and moving away from that case, just partitioning that case off and just speaking generally about criminal cases as well. Sometimes information is not brought to the public. Knowledge I say knowledge or information, but there is certain things deemed inadmissible, right? But they may be facts. But this is nothing to do with that case. But I'll give you an example. There was something that they have in the legal legal world called a malrap. It takes place in prison. After a prisoner is convicted, and for like a serious crime, there'll be a meeting between the police, the leading prison officer in the wing, the psychologist, and we'll a multidisciplinary team review, right, with different members of staff that will be, have been, or that do work with the prisoner. And what comes out in that meeting is they decide where that person should be sent to serve their sentence, what kind of person they are, and they're kind of forming their opinion of where best to send them to help reform them, right? Information about the case, stuff that wouldn't be allowed in court, but the police had reason or had statements, or there was reason why this information came to light, and that information is now available to those workers. This guy is convicted or this woman is convicted, so it doesn't matter where he or she, it's not gonna damage them in any legal way, but these are just stuff that wouldn't make it into the courtroom, but in another professional setting they're relevant. So it's it's a very specialist and complicated thing, and that's why it's better when you hear people on the internet talking. They're not talking from a expert witness. They're giving opinion, and commentary is different from somebody who is for example, a lecturer, former practicing barrister, or even a law graduate. It's a different level of accuracy and information that you're getting. But yeah, the live link number is 07826 115543. That's 07826 115543.